Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome hair and makeup designer Flora Moody, who joins us to talk about their work on 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. Flora will discuss the continuation of her work on the franchise and the small details in her work that reveal a lot about the characters. Please be warned there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Flora. Hi, Flora. Thank you for joining me today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Excited to sit down and speak to you about your work on 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. I think before we jump into the like nitty gritty of it all, how have you found the reception to the film itself?
Oh, it's been amazing. It's been I didn't think that it would necessarily be bigger than 28 years later, but it definitely feels like people potentially reacted in a stronger way to the Bone Temple rather than 28 years later. I think the avid fans of 28 years later loved the fact that there was just another movie to the franchise. And then when Bone Temple came out, they almost just saw it for the movie that it was. It didn't have, it wasn't necessarily the next film coming out. It was almost a standalone film on its own, and people appreciated it for what it was.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you watch like films that have like a trilogy or a sequel, it's like it's like a continuation of the story, but it feels like it doesn't feel like a separate entity sometimes.
Yeah.
So it kind of feels like I don't want to say like watching a TV show, but you're following on a bigger story, whilst here you're still in the same sand pit, but you're playing with different toys.
Yeah. And what did you think? Like when you compared the two, what were your thoughts on the two?
So I like the first one. The first 28 Years Later, I really enjoyed that, and being back in that world, it felt a bit odd, but then also because it has been so long. But then at the same time, I feel like they could cheat with it by saying, "Oh, but it's 28 years later, so it's a whole different world. You don't have to worry about what
Yeah.
was it like previously." But I feel like this one feels like story-wise feels smaller, but it feels like in terms of like visual scope-wise, like a lot bigger. So you're kind of, I don't know, you just feel like in a different kind of world, and it's pushing what's the story along of what's happening. So rather
Yeah.
than having everything reintroduced, you're kind of put in, like, strap your seatbelt in, we're diving straight into this, and it gets a really nice balance between Dr. Kelson's story and then also the Jimmy's story as
Yeah.
well. And there's a
Yeah.
really balance between it, and you kind of, I don't know, jumping between the two, you'd think it would give you a bit of a whiplash because there's such different types of people.
Yeah.
But in this film, it doesn't feel like that, and it actually sometimes you kind of want to go back to each story when it cuts. 'Cause like, no, you've left me in a certain spot that you
Yeah.
should.
Yeah.
But now it's like, actually, I like being here as well, so I don't
Yeah.
really know what to expect.
Yeah. It definitely, when we were doing 28 years later, it was world building, setting up the world as it would be 28 years down the line. Um, and so I guess, like you said, that's a wonderful way of putting it, that it's a wider world. You had the cinematic landscapes, you had the drone shots, it had the feeling that the whole of England was empty, and setting up, how people were living, whereas Bone Temple didn't need to do any of that. It could just crack on straight away and get on with the story, and kind of immerse itself into, like you said, Samson, Kelson, the Jimmies, and kind of give them their screen time. I felt watching Bone Temple, it's not often that you work on a film and then go and see a film and you're blown away by that film, because so often you watch the film and you think, oh, that I was behind that tree, or oh, I was behind, do you remember that day they served, I don't know, pancakes for breakfast? And the Bone Temple, I was blown away. I was absolutely blown away. I hadn't realized how many close-ups there were. I felt like it really like showed the hair, makeup, prosthetics side of things wonderfully. I was really amazed. Like I came away thinking, oh my God, we did so much, which, you know, it's not often that you're blown away by how much work you and the team did, but it was very apparent, and it really showcased that really well for us. Yeah. Chuffed to bits.
When you do have something like that, does that make you sort of, I wouldn't say worried, but I guess you plan it out so everybody has their looks, but when you see it on the big screen, do you ever just, obviously you'll be proud of your work, but do you ever think sometimes like, oh wow, they're actually showcasing it, it's not just something, you know, like an afterthought in a way? Because I can imagine that sometimes, like as a hair and makeup designer, or even like a production designer or set decorating and all those sort of things, that people think about the actor rather than everything that goes around to create the character in a way.
Yeah, like putting it under a magnifying glass.
Yeah,
So,
effectively, yeah.
no, I don't. No, I don't let that worry me actually, because you employ really amazing people. You come up with the best collaborative idea and push ideas forward and come up with some cool things that you're really happy with and execute them well. And you've tested them loads before they eventually end up on camera, so you're pretty confident that what you're putting in front of the camera works. And then it's a little bit out of your hands. Like you can only do the best that you can do at the time with the tools that you're given, with the direction that you're given by the director and the actors, and working with everyone. And then to have it kind of, I guess, photographed in an essence and be really proud of it, that's a huge bonus out the other end of it. I think that's what the surprise was, that I was amazed at how awesome it looked. I mean, I know that's me blowing my own trumpet and the team's work, but I was really amazed. I think the way that she shot it, the way it was framed, the lighting, Sean Bobbitt was our DOP. It was just, yeah, there were no, and also I look at it with such a critical eye. You're always looking for the defects, the things that went slightly wrong, and I couldn't see anything that kind of stood out as an error, which was again another like massive bonus. It was super chuffed.
I guess as well, when you see it on the big screen, it does, you can kind of then maybe nitpick a little bit, like, oh, I might have missed something here, or I might have done something here, or maybe we should have done something differently. But I guess from the sounds of it, it sounds like it was sort of
Nailed
everything
it.
was nailed. Yeah, just don't need to worry about it. Bye.
You couldn't, the type of show it was a pretty mental production. We had 5 weeks prep for 28 years later, which is nothing when you think about the size of the production that it was. And then 3 weeks into that 5 weeks prep, we had 2 weeks of pre-shoots before we actually started filming. So in essence, we had 3 weeks prep, and then started filming 28 years later, which was all up north, on location, loads of different locations. We're kind of in 2-3 different locations every week, living out of a suitcase. Like it was mental. And we went straight into, we had a 4-week hiatus between 28 years later and Bone Temple, but everyone had to be set up and ready to go. So we were prepping Bone Temple whilst 28 years later was filming, and we were moving around like a caravan, like rodeo, and then straight into shooting Bone Temple, and especially the two different aesthetics of the two movies. So you're dealing with Danny on set and then walking away back to unit base and having a phone call, or having Nia there having a chat about her view on the Jimmies, which were different than Danny. So it was a huge juggle that the team absorbed, and for that to then come up on screen and to be breathing a sigh of relief, I think that's probably where the kind of like, it's okay, we did okay, because at the time you are just trying to stop yourself from sinking. You're working at like 150%.
I guess it's also, you need to think about, like, as like a designer, it must be, if walking a fine tightrope would be like, I'm with Danny on this, and then I'm on Nia on this, I can imagine that you have to sometimes be really careful that you don't say the wrong thing when you're talking to each director, because also, as you said, like if you're shooting one but you're still prepping another, uh, which is probably quite a lot in itself. But then also, like, even the prep time, how do you manage your time in prep to make sure that you're ready for like day one of pre-shoots and then day one of actual shoot? Like that's quite seems quite a lot to sort of take in, and I can imagine there's a lot of hours and a lot of sort of testing
Yeah.
involved as well, because it's not a simple, oh, it's a contemporary film, so they'll just have,
Yeah.
I don't know, Mac on their face as like a
Yeah.
blusher. But then actually, no, they need to have a certain look.
Old school makeup reference there. Love it.
Thank you. I'm literally trying to think what my wife has on her table, so just thinking.
It definitely, you definitely need some tact and an amazing team. I have the best team in the whole world, who are really supportive and really good at their jobs, and so you're not having to carry any team member. They've got it in the bag, and I guess what they wanted was so different that your brain almost just sort of could flip between black and white. There were times where I was a bit, for example, Kelson, Ralph Fiennes, we had him in 28 Years Later. His look was established, orange iodine head to foot. And I was like, oh my God, great. And when I was prepping Bone Temple, I was like, Kelson, all good, done. Don't even need to think about him. Okay, moving on to the next person. But then speaking to Nia liked the idea, and it was her idea to, as Dr. Kelson became more comfortable with Samson, he kind of stopped applying the iodine. So Kelson subtly throughout filming had 3 stages of heavy iodine when you first saw him, a sort of medium, and then a light wash of iodine towards the end. And Samson at the same time went from heavily infected and then a medium infected to a lightly infected. I don't know if you saw that too. So he as the effect of the infection wore off and got thinner, and the drugs that they were taking worked, he became less veiny, less his contact lenses became less bloodshot, he lost wounds, he became more human. So we were working these 2 characters. So my smugness at having nailed Kelson in 28 Years Later was suddenly like, Flora, do you mind if we could see some tests of like 3 different stages of Kelson and Samson? And you're like, oh my God, no, I thought we'd done that. So you never know what's going to pop up. I just ticked that box, and suddenly we're needing to get extras in to cover them in iodine, to run various tests, and Nia didn't necessarily want such a punchy iodine, so it was new ingredients to have it. Just, you never know what every day is going to bring. And I think the biggest thing in film is that you need to be able to work very quickly, on your toes all the time, and be able to execute something to the best of your ability, even if it isn't liked and it isn't quite good enough, but you damn hell tried your hardest to make it work, because that's essentially what every single person in the whole crew is doing. They are just juggling these plates, trying to keep the train moving towards the end goal.
Those little touches, for example, having less and less iodine because it's showing Kelson's comfortableness, and even like the healing of Samson.
Yeah,
it's so simple but so smart at the same time, that you can just
I'll take credit for that.
But
I take it back. It wasn't Nia, it was my idea.
So it's okay, I can fix it in post. But even so, like stuff like that where it's just really simple, and it's like you could tell the audience that you don't need to say, oh, I don't need, I need a scene where Kelson's looking in the mirror, it's like, don't need to add any more of this today because I'm okay.
Yeah. Or like a hesitation with the sponge, not today.
Yeah, exactly. It just puts it to the side and it's fine. And you don't need that. And you can sort of watch it and people kind of enjoy it. But then also, like, it's just, again, like as like a designer, you probably thought in a way, even though you had nailed that look, there must have been certain days where you're thinking, okay, today we don't actually need to apply that much iodine, so it's not in that look. So actually we're kind of happy about it, so we can put that to the side. And
Yeah.
good old Ray Fiennes doesn't need to worry about it today. He doesn't need a 20-minute shower to get it off. He'll just need a
Yeah.
5-minute shower.
Oh, the best stories, I think, in filmmaking are the ones that don't need any explanation. That the subtle storytelling is what sets good directors, bad directors, screenplays, hair and makeup designers, props. When you notice something in a film, I think it hasn't done its job, because it's pulled you out of the immersive experience that I think a film does. And that's where Bone Temple completely got me. I forgot that I was watching a film that I'd made, and I got sucked into the storytelling and the visuals of it, which was amazing.
I think you noticed that as well with stuff like the characters for the Jimmies, for example. Of course, you've got Jack O'Connell, who's got Sir Lord Jimmy, who has the rings, the god awful teeth, and all of them have the wigs. But I feel like when you look at each Jimmy, they have certain things about them, and not just in costume wise, but look wise as well. So when you have Jimmy Ink, where she has the upside down cross, I don't know if you want to say it's like carved in or if it's burnt on her, which is just like quite like a horrible sort of image. And then you also have I'm trying to get the other characters now, but like even with their looks and just how dirty they look, or just
Yeah.
how slightly unkept, I guess, in a way that, like, I don't want to say they're like not savages, but they're just such feral people that
Yeah.
that must have been quite fun to know that you can create different looks for each person, and that
Oh,
like they're not just going to be they're not pieces there to look at, but they're all their own individuals as well.
yeah, we absolutely. You have multiple fittings with each cast member, and take lots of different photos, lots of different ideas. All of them had the inverted cross, and the idea was that it had the difference was that I had sort of 20 crosses made up, some that were carved in quite brutally, others where they removed the skin around the cross. So it was almost like they had left the raised bit of the cross and then removed some skin around it. So different, just to make them all slightly their own and individual. And then we would the actors would be like, oh, that one's good, let's try that one. And we try that one, take a picture, try that one, take a picture. And then dealing with different levels of breakdown. Jimmy Ink has tattoos, so again designing all the tattoos that cover her arms, her chest, her throat. She has one on her throat that was meant to be a bit of an angel of the north, because that's something that she had seen as she walked around, but it had a crown on it, so it was like Jimmy Crystal, so Jimmy Crystal, but angel of the north. And then I had done some designs where I was like, for every person or infected she killed, she marked her skin, because she's only using a biro with a needle, so it's all stick and poke. And then that kind of looked a bit weird and didn't read very well on the camera, all these lines all over her arms. So we kind of I went down a Watership Down, like what's most harrowing for you as a child? And I was like, Watership Down, the flying bunny with the red eyes. Oh my God. So she's got the bunny on her arm with the red eyes, and then kind of family. She'd drawn a dad, a mom, and a little stick kid, and then she'd crossed it out and scribbled it. So it was kind of like a kid doodling, and you've got to remember they all have the mental age of, they haven't grown up, they've grown up in a world with no rules, no regulations, no hierarchy apart from this mental so Jimmy Crystal, so they're so messed up in their heads. Even though they're adult form, they're still very, very childish. So, and that's what makes them terrifying. It's like child armies. Give a kid a gun, and that their seemingly lack of empathy isn't a lack of empathy. It's just that they haven't yet become or grown an awareness that comes with being an adult, and the knock-on effect of all the bad stuff that one is doing. So that was amazing to kind of you could think like a kid, and what would a kid do on their arm if they were tattooing themselves, and what would a kid do to a wig if they put it on their head and it was itchy? What would a kid do? And they'd just cut it. So it was just, yeah, it was it was a cool mindset to sort of insert yourself into, and all of the Jimmies, all of the actors really went to town with their characters. It was once they put those suits on and the wigs on and got all their wounds and cuts and gashes and put the teeth in, they had, all of them had teeth, and the idea was that most of them were about all obviously under the age of 28 or maybe slightly older, but their teeth weren't as ruined as Jimmy Crystal, because he would have been 7, 8, 9, 10 when it hit, so he was a bit older, like a decade older than them. So you'll notice that his teeth were pretty ruined because he had been around longer for them to be ruined, and whereas they had kind of slightly fresher teeth because they were all meant to be younger. So yeah, storytelling, kind of drops of storytelling throughout that you might not notice, but God, there's a lot of hard work for everyone behind it. God, that was rambling, wasn't it?
No, don't be silly. I like those sort of answers because there's actually a lot to take in, and I need to make sure I dissect it correctly. But because you're talking about like the tattoo side, because it's not necessarily, what's the word? They're set in a post-apocalyptic world. They, as you mentioned, they were just a needle and a biro to sort of draw on themselves. When it comes to something like that, those little details, do you have to take a step back to think about how this world's affected to them? Because their tattoo is not going to look clean. It's going to look quite shoddy because you're doing it to yourself. I don't know if it depends on which side. If you have, if you're right-handed, but then you have to use your left hand. So then if you're not left-handed,
they're all on her left arm because we figured she's right-handed. So it's just her playing with, and she has a blank space at the back where she can't get to. So all of that has been thought about. There are quite a few on her hand because it's the easiest place to get to. Don't really ask about the neck, but maybe she had a mirror. That it looks great. So yeah, I've always said to people, if there's someone in a film and they've got a shaved head and you think, oh my gosh, that's so easy, they just had a shaved head, the amount of work that probably went into getting them to the shaved head was probably weeks, if not months, of testing, camera tests. They would have been, we had all the different wigs that you might have gone through: brunette, black, blonde, different hairstyles, and then at the end been like, let's just shave her head, and you're like, cool. But there's so much work that goes into what eventually ends up on camera, even if it's nothing on camera or what you perceive as nothing.
Yeah, I think there's that, like, I've seen like a meme going around on like X or whatever of like it was like the Breaking Bad characters, and then at the bottom is like hair designer. I don't know their name, so apologies. And then somebody's like, why do they need a hair designer when they're all bald? And it's like, well, they had to get there at some point, and also somebody needs to still cut their hair before they get on set. Like, who knows?
Oh my gosh, Dwayne Johnson has a personal hairdresser who travels with him and does all the movies, and you think, but he's got a shaved head. It's like, someone's got to shave his head. Someone's got to put sun cream on that and then dab it with tissues when it gets sweaty. Like that, every little job that you see has been so meticulously thought out, to the rings on people's fingers, backstories of the rings, where did it come from, how did they get it? It's amazing. I think it's, if you appreciate, I only appreciate it because I work in it, and it's taken me a while to fully appreciate what everyone does and what department everyone, and how much work everyone puts in, down to catering on a film set. You rock up and eat the food, but actually they've been there since 4 o'clock making the food. So yeah, the backstory behind everything's huge.
Yeah, exactly. And I just, again, that's the sort of little details I love in films, and how it just works. You don't question it as well. You don't think, oh, why would they have a tattoo? But it's like, actually, no, this is just the way that they live. This is the world that they live in. This is how they behave. This is how they sort of get on with their day to day. And you don't question it as well. Like, I don't, I think more, I think about when I look at like their faces, you just, like the neck tattoo, or like even like abrasions on their faces, you kind of just accept it, but then also think like there's something behind that. I don't want to know, but I think it's best not to ask to find out, because it could be something not nice, and I don't particularly want to, I don't, you don't want to know, so that, it could be, well, it feels real life a bit awkward, but then also they could say, oh, let me show you how I did it. And it's like, oh, that means it's going to happen to me now.
Yeah. What did you think of the skinning scene in Bone Temple?
So I don't mind violence so much in films, but it was very, very, like, it was quite like hard to watch, and it was grim
Yeah.
to watch.
Yeah.
But I guess in a part of a way as well is that like, there's a reason why it's in the film. It's not gratuitous. It's to show how sick these people are at what they
Yeah.
do. And when they talked about, like, oh, deshirt them, do this, you think, what's going to happen here? It's like, surely they're not going to skin them. And then they do it, and you think, like, these people aren't messing about. And whatever's coming next, or what's happening next to them, it's not. I don't particularly want to be around or see them do that. But I guess that kind of leads to my question as well, is like, how do you work with prosthetics? Because obviously you're not skinning people alive in films, really, but when you have those sort of scenes where it is heavy use of prosthetics, how do you go about talking ideas with the prosthetics designer and also working together, like in pre-production and then on set, to make sure that you're all both aligned to what's happening?
The prosthetics designer was a gentleman called John Nolan, who is awesome, and he has a studio in North London. So the actors went to John's place, had full body, chest casts done of their bodies, and then essentially they had the sculpt was of the skinning. So they had essentially a t-shirt. They put on a t-shirt that had all the muscle tissue fibers, little veins, like the skin had come off. And then that gets sent to the prosthetics on the ground, who in this case it was run by V Holt and Stu Hamilton, who were the like kind of on the ground operational, making stuff work. And then their team apply, blending out the edges on the arms, down near the like sort of lower abdomen, around the neck. So they have that done, come into us, we do hair, makeup, blood, sweat, add all the bits and pieces, put on wigs, and then everyone then travels to set together, and everyone, it's just a big group effort to cover in sweat, make look as rough, add the blood, fresh blood. They've got t-shirts of silicone that are just plopped on the floor. Then you're working with props and set deck to dress those bits into the ground. Set deck adding the blood. You will have had a chat with props beforehand as to what blood you're using. So it's such a collaboration, and all comes together in the end with the overseeing eye of Nia, who's might be like, let's add a bit more blood there, make that a bit more gruesome. But so it's from start to finish a collaboration of that. In that case, it's quite clear that John and his team are doing this bit, because it is so big, that is, I might be like, do you need a hand? And they're like, no, we got it. And so it's just an organic, an organic dance of who's doing what. But in this case, it's quite apparent. But things where it becomes even more, I guess, beautiful, so to speak, is in the character of Samson. That was John Nolan and his team, and Samson has like shoulder traps, thigh prosthetics. So Chai Lewis Parry, who plays Samson, would go in, he'd be attacked by the prosthetics team for so many hours. Oh my gosh, this man and the team were amazing. Just 5, 6, 7 hours in prosthetics. And then Becca and myself, my supervisor Becca, would jump in and add in the infection that was on across his chest, put in the wounds on his face, put the wig on, put a sort of bold piece here. So he's with us for like an hour and a half. And then for the final half an hour, everyone jumps in and both teams throw in dirt, blood, breakdown. So it's a dance. It's a huge dance of how can I help? Who do you want to do that? That's definitely your ballpark, but we can take that on if you want. You know, he had in not so much in Nia's, she wasn't too keen on it, but in Danny's 28 years later, he had quite a big patch here in his on his skull where the wig didn't sit, where essentially a big wound, there was a wound here that was kind of covered with a bit of hair. And that was us, like we took that on because it's kind, you know, we can easily do it. But I would have brought that up with John and been like, hey, Danny wants a massive wound here. You know, do you want to do that? You know, and he's like, do you know what? We're kind of busy doing the rest of Samson. And I'm like, that's cool, we'll take it on. So when you're working with lovely people, it's a wonderful collaboration.
I can, but personally, it could be personally like quite fun knowing that you can add like, oh, let's add a bit more blood. Should we go a bit more with this? Yeah, we can do it because it's already gonna look brutal. Let's just add to it and make it look even worse. And just even like around them as well, like on the floor, you can have extra blood, and it's like, yeah, put some over there. Maybe because they've cut into the back, there might be some sort of artery there. So let's put some blood behind them because it probably would have sprayed, and then maybe put some on somebody's face to add to it. But even like the prosthetics in general, it's amazing what people can do and how much they can transform someone into someone else. Like I've seen it with where, like, you know, I've seen it with where someone who's very famous, and you're like, oh, amazing, the, you know, handsome looking person, as soon as they put on the prosthetics, they're completely transformed into somebody completely different. And it's just amazing that people can do that, and it's like it's possible. Like, but then also how much hard work goes into it, because you start off with the plastering of people's bodies to make sure that you've got the right they're like right height, and that they're in sort of comfortable with what you're doing, and then you're building around that. And then I wonder what it must be as an actor being like, oh, you know, turn up to set just in what your trackies and t-shirt, and then afterwards when you're set ready, just there being in all these prosthetics and being like, wow, I'm like completely different person. You know, like, this is actually a quite good look for me. Maybe not so much the blood, but you know, the sort of other patches on me.
I think that's where it's wonderful when you hear about actors who appreciate what we do and the sort of craft of it, because essentially everyone in the industry has a craft that they are excelling at and good at. And if we can appreciate each other's departments and our crafts, then, you know, that is such a beautiful relationship. And the actors come in and we might put prosthetics and hair, makeup, wigs on them, and they walk to set, but they need to be good at their craft in order to sell what we've done. So it's I scratch your back, you scratch mine. You know, if an actor goes to set in a wig and kind of doesn't really touch it, or when he does or she does touch it, they kind of, you know, don't really put their fingers through their hair, then it's going to sell it as it doesn't help the wig. But if you've got an actor like Jack O'Connell was amazing in his wig, and I always say, touch the wig, like run your fingers through your hair like you would your own hair, you know, tuck it behind your ears, you know, don't be afraid of it, don't treat it like a hat or an object on your head. And he was so good at sort of pushing it. If the wind, sometimes you'll notice in some things, like the wind will take the wig across the face and the actor won't touch it because it's a wig. But a good actor can treat it like their own and get it out of the way and tuck it and not be scared of it. So it's definitely across the board appreciations of what each other is doing, and that's where you get golden moments and it comes across really well on screen.
And I guess as well, like, because they've been with you throughout the whole process, they kind of understand how the wig's going to work, compared to like if you just turn up thinking that like no prep whatsoever. And I guess it could also add to their character when they're playing with their hair, and then they could just
Yeah.
brush their hands through it.
Yeah.
And they can kind of, I wouldn't say cheat, but they could also like, you know, when they just pull it off their hair as well later on when they're sort of de-Jimmy-fying themselves, like that could play a part to it. It's like how you've probably have put it in and weaved it into their real hair.
Well, a lot of the Jimmies actually shave their heads. Like Maura Bird, they actually shaved their head, which was amazing. They had long hair before we were filming, and then they decided, you know what, I'm gonna get rid of this and be a legit Jimmy with the roughly shaven head underneath. So she went through that transformation. And we had moments where ideas where maybe there was a campfire scene and some of the Jimmies were sleeping, and we were like, oh, wouldn't it be good if one of them's lying on their back and the wig has slipped back and the wig is kind of sitting flat on the floor and you just see the dirty, grimy, shaved head underneath. So little moments like that where you can help the story along by not doing very much, but it's the little nuances that make it really cool.
Again, the little details mentioned before, like, and just adding to it, the visual storytelling rather than being like, oh, look, I have a shaved head under here.
Yeah.
I do want to sort of jump back to go to Dr. Kelson's look in the finale with the number of the beast. What an absolute nightmare fuel that look was, especially with the costume. It reminded me a little bit of like the Black Plague when they had the doctors turn up
with the pointy noses.
With the pointy nose, that's literally where my mind went. I was like, it just creeped me out so much, and I was just thinking, like, he, as a doctor, he must have known that sort of thing. But how did you go about creating the look for that scene, for that sort of finale part? Because there's a sort of, again, you could probably play it as like for jokes because it's somebody pretending to be the devil, and he already has a funny look being covered in iodine. Where did you begin with creating the look for that, and what research went into it as well?
I started that one by thinking, what does he have access to? So I didn't want him to suddenly be rocking up looking, I don't know, lacquered. Or you have to think of where he is in the story and in his environment. So he has access to plants, a river, the environmental, bark. It's pretty low key. He's not going to suddenly come out with a luminous gold nail polish or paint. It's just not around anymore. So and also, what is he trying to achieve? And he's trying to achieve looking like the devil and fear. So it was a balance of just thinking, okay, what can I put in front of Nia as options? Because you always have to give options. Usually you start with 3 and, see where the road takes you. So I had an idea for kind of mud and maybe upping the iodine levels underneath. And then he would have smeared himself in mud, but it would have cracked. So then he had all these orange, quite violent orange cracks coming through this dried mud. That would look cool, kind of like lava, that kind of vibe. But when we tried to test that, oh my gosh, you've got to think, what mud is going to stay on his face whilst he's dancing around the place? So is it starting to fall off in shot? You've got to think about what the actor has to do. He's doing a really violent dance all over the set. You don't want mud flakes falling off everywhere and saying cut, and you have to go in and gather up the mud. And Rafe's there, having been in character, suddenly with nothing on his face. So there's so many variables that you have to take into consideration. Also the fact that we knew it was going to be shot at night, so you need something that's quite punchy visually. And one of my ideas was, well, he's got fire, and fire is ash and soot, and you get, black, grays, whites. So let's see what that looks like over. So we We poured the ash out. We got sort of black, grey. We got different textures and colors, and we actually eventually, it didn't read as much as I had hoped, but they were handprints, so it was like he was putting his hands in the ash and not rubbing it, but just sort of doing this all over him, which I'd got from, do you remember that movie with Keanu Reeves and Tommy Lee Jones? It's really scary, The Devil's Advocate. Do you remember The Devil's Advocate? It was like a 90s movie.
I think I haven't seen it. Is that Al Pacino? Or was it?
Yes, sorry, no,
Yeah.
no, yeah, it was Al Pacino. And there was a bit in it that I was like, oh my God, do you remember that scary bit in Devil's Advocate? And it was, I think, lots of women or someone, a bit of material goes over this woman and her face changes, and it scared the hell out of me. Like, it was really terrifying. It really like gave me a visceral, terrified feeling when I saw it at the age of, I don't think, 16 or something. And when I rewatched it, it wasn't as scary as I remembered it, but what had come out of it was all these hands. There were lots of hands, and maybe the portrait behind Al Pacino moved at one point, and there were all these human forms, but I remember the hands playing quite a big part of like clawing and pawing. So I was like, okay, let's get hands in there, these sort of handprints of, you know, if you were dragged down into the depths. You know, in movies it's very often a hand coming up and grabbing you and pulling you down. So yeah, we ended up getting lovely background artists in, and then attacking them and trying out all these different handprints. We went for a like powdered white on top of his head, like he'd kind of shook some white powder over and then darkened his eyes. We gave him black mouth blood to knock out his teeth, and sort of stained the inside of his lips, like, you know, he'd had it in his mouth for a while. And then, lucky for us, what happened as he did the moves and did the dance, it kind of sweated, which led to this amazing like rivulets of sweat going through the ash, which was awesome. It looked really cool too. Like, it was something that added to it. It was something that I had no control over, but actually that's what would have happened anyway. So that just enhanced and elevated the original design anyway. So that's how that came about. Yeah, and then reapplied that on Rafe and myself and Lucy, who was his makeup artist. Myself and Lucy would get him in the makeup chair and attack him, so to speak, and then he would go off the set and Lucy would stand by on him. And yeah, it was cool. He loved it. He loved that look. It was something that the iodine look was applied with sponges and brushes, so we always said we were like little cats, like literally beep, 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 all over his body, and like, oh, this is nice for you, isn't it? And then suddenly we're there with hands, and you know, Lucy and I would make sure that wherever we did, she would do her right hand and do the right side of him, because it was as if he was doing the right side of him, and I'd do my left hand and do that side. So we always made sure that the handprints were where he himself could have done it. Yeah, it was cool, all whilst listening to probably quite hardcore rock, so that Rafe could get in the mood. So it's quite intense hair and makeup sessions. We did it really quickly.
I think as well, like, just hearing that, where it's not just what the person would have in their locker in terms of what was left in that world, but it's also the environment, as you're mentioning, the soot, the smoke. Like, how was that going to add to it? Even the sweating, like, is it going to make it run? Is it going to affect him? Let's be honest, at this point, there probably doesn't any like sweat-proof makeup or stuff in the world left. And then also when you talk about the handprints, that you know that he's going to be doing it himself. So if we do right over left, left over right, so that it doesn't look funny if somebody freeze framed it and it's like, why is that handprint slightly why is that different compared to that?
There's nothing worse than for example, I watched something the other day and everything looked so clean. I was like, why are the costumes so clean? Like, nothing's had any breakdown done to it, and it looked like it had just been opened from a package, or maybe it was a rucksack. And I was like, they're meant to have had that rucksack for decades, and it looks like it's, you know, they've I don't know, brand spanking new. So that annoyed me because I could instantly tell that the costume person had just, or props had just given them that rucksack. It's and if it had been broken down, you wouldn't have been pulled out of what you were watching. But I think those that work in the industry are pretty terrible at being that critical. So but yeah, try as we might, we try and make it look as organic and natural as possible.
I agree that that you might like keep an eye on that, but I think if you're watching something that is something like post-apocalyptic, you don't want to see something brand new, because it's like, well, hang on, it's gonna take you out no matter what, and it has to work in a way. But if you take it, if it is brand new, it's just like, well, how does that work? Also, it's not that wouldn't have been made in that year, because it came out in 2025. So how is that possible?
Why are they all in space?
What is this possible? That's not right.
Which people would pick up on, especially with something with such a big cult following. Those are things that you really have to keep in your brain, because there are people freeze framing, like you say, freeze framing it and kind of questioning, and luckily nothing so far has been sent my way as something that's a bit dodge. Hashtag smug.
You know what's going to happen. You'll log off.
I know.
You'll go make a cup of tea. Your phone will ping, and then you'll look and you're like, oh no. It's like, at Mr. Picky McPickerson, I found something. I've got two more questions. I think one is more of a sort of, maybe it's a pinch me moment, maybe it's not. But whilst I was doing some research, I found that this is mainly for 28 years later, but I thought I'd ask this anyway, that Skinner Illustrator produced Flora Moody's 28 late palettes, which I saw with a really funny caption, a bite me moment, which made me chuckle. How did something like that come about? And, how does it feel that they're making like palettes over, creating palettes for people to then use on themselves for your work?
It was pretty mega. That has when I was a trainee and a junior, and when you work your way up the ladder, and people bring out these palettes, and you're like, oh my God, there's an Everest palette. Oh my God, there's 28 Years a Slave palette. With the designer's name on it. That's an iconic moment. That's something that you think one day, maybe. I don't think I even thought that one day, maybe, but I did think, wouldn't that be cool? It actually came about from me wanting to get a cool gift for my crew. So I got in touch with Ken Diaz, health illustrator, PPI, Skin Illustrators, and asked him if I could make a palette for 28 Years Later. So it came from me wanting to put the palette together and then buy them for my team. So that's what I did. And they, as a wrap gift, as a thank you. And then they said, is there any chance can we put the 28 Years Later, sell it as merch almost? But that was actually declined. That's why it says 28 years late or 28 late. And they said, do you mind if we then sell it on? And I was like, yes, if you give me a high percentage of every sale. And they said no. So they said no, we won't do that. But I'm really proud. It was also, you have to have done a job where it warrants having a palette. So we had iodine, we had the bloods, we had poo, like loads of different colors of poo, especially in 28 Years Later, down the back of all the infected. So we had smeary poo, crusty poo, all of these different poo jars that everyone had for every character. So that's in there. It was really cool. It was definitely a moment that I was very proud of.
Yeah, and I can imagine that as well. Like, you're just doing it as like a fun thing, and then it kind of not spirals, but like snowballs into something else. And I guess as well, when people say like, "Can we do this?" You're like, "Wow, like this is pretty cool." Like, it's gone from something a little bit fun to something that has legs.
What's that thing called where people? Because you never think that you're Like I'm pretty self-depreciating, so you never really think, you don't want your ego to ever be like, yeah, of course I have a palette with my name on it,
Yeah, don't you?
Yeah, you don't. I did speak to someone who went, hey, I saw you got a palette, and I was like, I know, right? Isn't that cool? And then he went, yeah, I've got 2, or did you say I've got 3 out? And I was like, oh my god, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Like, good for
That's,
you.
that feels a bit like yeah, I've got one that's amazing. It's like, yeah, but I got like 3, 4. So
I know.
you know,
I think it probably was that.
come back to me. Come back to me in a
Yeah,
few, in a few
yeah,
years' time. It's like,
yeah.
oh, okay. I think that's definitely puts you back down to earth as well. We think, yeah, this is incredible. It's like, oh no, we've got 5. Proper.
Well, it's another thing that I always say is, you know how everyone says you're only as good as your last movie. I found that you're only really as good as you are currently. I think that's something, not as good as, but do you ever find when you're working on films, like when people say, oh, what have you worked on? You never go deep back. Like you never say, like I would say now, oh, I just finished Rings of Power and we did 28 years later. So it's really a 2-year, that's it. That's all you're kind of, not valid, but that's your current. If I were to go, if someone said, what have you worked on? I wouldn't ever go, I worked on The Hobbit 14 years ago, or Star Wars, like way, but you don't ever go back. So you're only really as current as the last 2 years of your kind of life, of your projects, before you say things and people are like, I never saw that. Where was that? And you're like, oh, it came out on Amazon about 4 years ago. Don't know if you saw it. No, I didn't. You're like, okay. So I think that's quite humbling, to never let yourself get an ego, because essentially there's, like, our world is so fast paced and fast moving that you could literally slip in the gutter at one moment, and before you know it, you're not relevant anymore. I don't know if
Yeah,
it's the
just
same transport.
yeah, it is a little bit. Because I think it's more just as like if you're constantly working. I think it's kind of like, in a way, like that breakdown that you said is a little bit sad, because even though you could have worked on something like 10 years ago, it's like people want to know what you've done recently, and it's like, well, there's so much that somebody picks up on a job as well. Not just it's not just about what
The
you did
name and
like 2 years ago. Yeah, it's like,
yeah,
actually I did something 10 years ago where it was really good. It's really cool and people loved it. Or even the worst is, like, imagine if you work on something and they're like, yeah, we're not releasing it whatsoever. So then all that hard work that people do, they're like, yeah, we just canned it. We're not going to be releasing it,
yeah.
even though we've done it.
I did a Game of Thrones prequel with Naomi Watts. It wasn't terribly long because we just shot the pilot, but it was about 8 weeks in Northern Ireland. And God, she looked so good. She had such a beautiful wig, such a beautiful wig. I was so proud. And then it didn't get released, and they kind of went off and did the current Game of Thrones thing that is happening. Um, and then when I tried to release some photos, thinking, look at these amazing photos I've got of Naomi Watts in this wonderful wig, HBO got in touch and were like, Flora, can you take down the photos? You're confusing the fans. And I was like, oh, sorry, I thought because it wasn't released, it was kind of like it's okay, but I didn't, things run deep in the Game of Thrones world.
Yeah, 100%. And also, but they're not, but like, but that's also like, people don't get to see your work on that, or how cool it would have looked. And that's like kind of, it's like a bit of a twinge of sadness, because it's like it's like Picasso painting a picture and then being like, no, it's too similar to your other stuff or something, and then just put it in a closet somewhere and that's it.
Exactly.
Hide it away.
It's just like Picasso. Yes.
So,
I didn't want to say, but it's like Picasso.
but it's like yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's
then
like a long lost Rembrandt.
I think they just found one, or somebody
They
has
did.
one, which is
Yeah.
crazy that people are still finding these things. Or I think it was something to do that somebody thought it was a fake, or it was something completely different, and somebody's like, no, this is an early Rembrandt. So
Yeah. It took 2 years to verify it.
Yeah, which is insane as well. But imagine if that was like your grandparents and they had it, and it was something that you saw every day or every weekend that you went over Sunday lunch, and it's like you didn't realize that you had a Rembrandt just on the kitchen, on the
And
kitchen
all
wall
of
or
those
something.
times you could have just nicked it and no one would have known.
Yeah, and or people, or yeah, you would have done that, or people would have been like, "Well, what is this?" For you, it's like, "Oh, it's just a random painting," but
Yeah.
actually, it's something really famous. You must be kicking yourself as well when you probably gave up on if you didn't want to take it and it was in their will, for you to take it.
Yeah.
That would
That
really
whole
annoy
thing.
you.
No
Yeah,
thanks.
no, thank you. Just to hit you up with my final question, what was your
Mhm.
favorite look to create?
He's pretty iconic, and also working with Rafe is pretty mega and very you are, there's no world outside that character, and you fully go in 100%, you give it 100%, and he's giving 100%. Nia is too. Costume, Gareth and Carson, it's so that character that has been formed and come to fruition is, there's no room in there for any cracks. So that's what's lovely. He's completely whole, and every angle has been thought about, down to head shaving, fingernails. There's no angle on that character that's been left to do its own thing. So I think as a whole, that he's solid. It's like getting 100% on a paper, or you at least put everything in, and there's no room. If someone went, I don't like it, it kind of didn't work there, you'd be like, okay, there's no room for doubt.
Yeah, I think I'll have to agree with you on that one. I just think he just looks perfect in it,
Yeah.
and you don't even bat an eyelid of like why somebody would be like that or why
Yeah.
that look is. It's just it is what it is.
Yeah.
I think if it's truly iconic, you have to wait until October and see how many people dress up as Kelson.
Yeah, and as the
And
Jimmies as well. I'm working on
yeah,
it. I just, I'm already there. I had, luckily when we were filming, I had ginger hair, long ginger hair, but I usually have this look, which I think would have been awkward, especially seeing as I think the Jimmy's acrylic wigs looked better than my hair and looked less damaged. They would have had better looking hair.
but you could have had in another world. We could have seen you in the posters and in the film as well. You
I
never
could
know.
have just hung out on set and not had to move. I could have been just another Jimmy.
They're like, "Ah, that Flora's there again. Do we tell her to get out of shot?" No,
No.
just keep it there. No one will notice. Fix it in post. Put this green tracksuit on, and then we can
Yeah.
take her out. No problem.
Yeah.
Flora, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Rob. It's been awesome.
28 years later, The Bone Temple is out now on VOD. I'm sure it'll come out on DVD, Blu-ray. Go out and watch Flora and her team's amazing work. Thank you again.
Thank you. Cheers, Rob.
Thank you. Take care and bye-bye.
See you later. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.